Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. My name is Zamanullah Sand. I facilitate virtual programs at Teacher Development Webinars. Teacher Development Webinars is a social action project to support teachers and educators around the world with professional development opportunities. It is an initiative using the rise in online professional development to connect people from around the world with opportunities which they may not have had due to the old normal of face-to-face conferences. And for this webinar, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Michael Free. Michael Free holds degrees in CESL and TFL, MA from University of Birmingham, music criticism, MA from McMaster University, and music performance from University of Western Ontario. In addition, he has obtained certificates in ELT, including teaching English to young learners from NM University and ELT management from TESOL International Association. Michael has lived and worked in Korea for over 15 years and has taught in broad range of contexts, public school, all grades from kindergarten to year 2 high school, vocational, including training for Winter Olympic volunteers and staff, and most recently, university level credit courses. He's currently an invited professor at Kangon National University, where his classes primarily happen in the liberal arts department and the Department of English Language Literature. In the latter, he teaches advanced English composition, communication skills, and discussion and debate. His newest course is entitled as Korean Language and Culture through Film and Media. It's a pleasure to have you at Teacher Development Webinars. Michael, welcome to Teacher Development Webinars.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. All right. You can see my screen all right, Amanullah?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. The beauty and power of images in the classroom. I really like art. I've liked art for a long time. I was trained in classical music a very, very long time ago, and in my studies, I found that I also liked visual arts. And I found that teaching, my wife has just arrived home. Hi, baby. I found that in my language teaching career, using visual art has been extremely helpful. And that's what I'm going to be talking about for about the next 50 or 60 minutes or so. Why use images? How can we use images in our classrooms? Well, that's mostly what I'm going to be showing you. I'm going to be going through and showing you a bunch of different things that I've done over the past few years, mostly but not exclusively with university students. None of this is particularly complicated. I'm not going to tell you a lot of theory, although if you like the theory, I've put a rather large PDF file into the chat so you can read to your heart's content. Are there any drawbacks to using images in language teaching or in teaching? If there are, I haven't found any. And what are the benefits? Well, there are quite a few. Here are some of them, and I've found that this has been consistent across all of my lessons that have used visual art. They are engaging. Students really, really enjoy looking at stuff. And they, after a little bit of initial reticence, they get into it quite consistently. As you'll see, these are very easy to use, which as a teacher, I know I love that, and I think all of you probably love that as well. Stuff that's easy to use. It's also reusable, so you can use these paintings and visual art over and over and over again. They are extremely low prep, which is another thing that makes them beautiful for me as a teacher. they also really keep the focus on the students. You don't have to spend a lot of time explaining what to do. You can, after very, very short instructions, you can get right into the learning and you can stay focused on the students, and you can also personalize this. And, it's just a great way to establish and maintain a connection with them. This is also very good if you want to let your students or encourage your students to do things that are creative, as well as pushing them a little bit and getting them to really look not just critically, but also pay attention to what they're seeing and pay attention to details. And you'll see that in a few minutes. And it helps with their visual literacy. So much information is given to our students these days through images that it's very, very helpful for them to practice. So my basic setup, there are two. When I'm working with the whole class, what I have is a full-sized whiteboard and then a beam projector and a screen. The whiteboard is for student work or for comments that I make. And then the beam projector and the screen is to project the image so that they can see it all the time. And if you want, you can give out some blank pieces of paper, one per student. That's optional, but I find it's helpful so that they can write notes down. They can practice what they're going to say. It makes them a little bit more comfortable. If you're a fan of station teaching, another way to set this up is to have 7 or 8 or 10 laminated images, just regular paper size, 8.5 by 11. And again, give them a blank piece of paper so that they can write down notes. That's the basic setup. It's really, really simple. I'd like to start with the multi-level language class. So in these types of classes that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, you have some students who are perhaps at a lower level and some students that are at a higher level, and then some students that are just in between. And one of my favorite paintings to use is Norman Rockwell's 1954 Girl at the Mirror. And I'll just let you take a look at that for a few seconds. So what are we going to do with this painting? Well, we're going to ask our students a very, very simple question. What do you see? What do you see in this painting? And their answers, you can get them to simply speak, or you can get them to write down their answers. And if you want to give them some preparation time, you can, or you can just make it completely spontaneous. And you can have them work by themselves, or you can have them work in pairs, or you can have them work in small groups. You can let them choose how they want to do this. And you can imagine what sort of responses you're going to get just by looking at this. For lower level students, they can just start with individual words, just one word at a time. What do you see? A girl, a hairbrush, a chair, a mirror. And if they need to use their L1, in my case, my students, that would be Korean. If they need to do that, they can. That's perfectly fine. For the intermediate students that are at a higher level, you can get them to make complete sentences. You can go around the room and have everybody create a sentence, or you can have them write it down. For higher level students, You can give them a little bit of extra prep time or not, as you like, depends on if you want to put a little bit of pressure on them. And here for higher level students, you want a more detailed, extended response. And you can have things here where you can ask them questions like, who is the lady in the magazine? Who do you think she is? How do you think the young lady feels looking at herself? One very interesting question that I always ask is, why is the doll kind of tossed to the side? What does this mean? What is the artist telling us? What is this girl thinking? And you elicit answers from your students and you help them. So in terms of low-level students, if they didn't know what the word for chair was in English and they said "uita," which is the Korean word, you can say "aha, chair." Or if they say, well, her hair is strange. It's not strange. It's tied up and pulled back. Why is the doll over here kind of tossed away? What is this girl thinking? Yeah, and Fernando has just messaged, you have different types of images, of course, paintings, drawings made by the students. Yes, indeed, you can. So you can see how this will work. You can do this in 5 minutes at the end of class, or you can do several images and take up a whole class period. You can let students choose the paintings. You can use student paintings if you want. You don't have to pick classic works like this if you don't want to. Another thing that I've done is some focused work on grammar. Now, grammar, I don't know how your students feel about it, but my students kind of hate it. It's boring, it's not exciting. So what we can do here is we take a picture like Picasso's The Tragedy from 1903, and we can get our students to engage with that picture and use a task-based approach where they have to do something that requires them to use grammar. So here the task would be, tell me the story. What's going on here? What's happening? Tell me. And this really lends itself to writing very well, but you can still do it orally if you want. And here you can focus on tenses. You can also use maybe the historical present and make it into a lesson on that. Why do we use the present tense to talk about an event that happened in the past to make it more exciting? You can have your students write out a story in the past tense using past tenses and then change it into the present tense and then present that story. You can have different groups of students write different parts of the story. You can have one group of students write a story about how these people came to be where they are. How did they end up on a beach? What happened to their shoes? Why are they so cold? And what is this woman holding in here in front of her? So many of my students claim that it's a baby, even though they can't see it. I've heard that answer a lot. So you can take a grammatical focus, but it's not mechanical anymore. You've made it creative. And some of the stories that students will come up with are absolutely fabulous. And it takes grammar, which is boring, and it brings it to life. And the students, when they start doing this, they forget that they're in a language classroom. And that's really, really amazing to see. So as I said, you can have students working alone, in pairs or groups. That's really up to you. Written answers, they tend to work best in this particular case. An alternate task that I've also tried, which works very well, especially for intermediate level students, is to have the students write out a dialogue. What are these people talking about? What's the young boy saying? Why are his hands like that? What will happen to these people next? My students are quite grim about this. They're not very optimistic for the chances of these particular people. They usually have them dying and being cold and hungry and miserable, which is a little bit grim. Another way you can use images, and I've done this a lot, is with thinking routines. And here, one of my favorite pictures to use is Impression Sunrise by Monet from 1872. And thinking routines, if you don't know what they are, they're pretty much exactly what you might think. You give the students a blank piece of paper and you have them write on the top, I see, I feel, and I wonder. And they start with, I see. And what they do is they simply list what they see. And again, just with the multi-level classes, if you have students who can only write down single words, that's okay. If they write down sentences, that's okay. And if they're at a higher level, what you want to do is try to get them to exhaust the painting, to tell you everything that they see, as much as they can. So this left part of the paper should be pretty full at the end. And then you can have students compare answers with each other. And on the whiteboard at the front of the room, you can write down the answers until you've gotten a very, very full response. The next thing they do is they talk about how they feel. When you see this, how do you feel? Do you feel happy? Do you feel sad? And then the question becomes, well, why? Why do you feel the way that you do? Most often with this particular painting, students tell me they feel calm. And we then talk about this. What is it that makes you feel calm about this painting? And then you can talk with them about colors. You can talk to them about Impressionism if you want to. If you don't know anything about Impressionism, don't worry. You don't have to, because there's no wrong answers here. And you can talk about Impressionism if you really want to, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. Some of the things that people see in this painting are quite amazing. You would think they would say the boat here, and then they say the sun, although some people are very adamant that this is actually the moon. I think it's the sun, but I'm biased because I know what the title of the painting is. But back here, what do you see? Some of my students see a forest. Some of my students see that the forest is actually on fire, and here we can see smoke. So everything in the background of this painting, which you can't actually see, is apparently the remains of a big fire. Some of my other students have seen factories in the clouds here, which is very interesting. I never thought that I would hear that. But the purpose here is just to get them to tell you what they see. It doesn't matter what it is. Yeah, Fernando says that they see a city. Yeah, it's possible. One thing that's very interesting, and more than one student has said this, is that off to the left of this boat, that's near the middle at the bottom, is another boat? Apparently not. Apparently, that's a shark. So there you go. There's a shark, and apparently that shark is chasing the people in the boat. Is this true? I have no idea. But it doesn't matter, because this is the students communicating what they see and what they feel. And the last question is the most abstract, and typically you're not going to see this particular side of the page filled up with thoughts, but this is what they're wondering about. When you look at this painting, what questions do you have about it? If Claude Monet was in the room, what would you ask him? What would you ask him about this? I wonder why he painted this. I wonder why the shark is chasing the people in the boat. And these thinking routines, you can use them over and over and over again. You use the same routine. Once the students know what you expect them to do, they come into the classroom, you pop a picture up on the screen, you give them a blank piece of paper, and you say, go. And they know what to do. You spend time eliciting answers, helping them with it, and they are consistently, at least in my case, consistently engaged, and they're very, very happy to be working with this kind of thing, as opposed to just doing mechanical exercises. And you can use these thinking routines over and over and over again, the same instructions, and you just use a different painting. And they are fantastic. And Fernando, yes, indeed, says fantastic images are magic. If you have higher level students, you can get into some critical thinking. And what you can do is you can take an image that tells a story, and you can have the students create that story or recreate that story and explain what it is that they see that is helping them create that story. So we start with description, and then we move into a little bit of deduction. This is one of my favorite paintings to use. The title is quite a mouthful. Erasistratus discovering the cause of Antiox disease. It's a neoclassical painting by Jacques-Louis David from 1774. And there is a whole story here, which is pretty typical of neoclassical art. And what you do in this case is you get the students to tell you what's going on, what's happening, and how the painter is telling this story. Another type of painting that I use for this particular thing, and this works well with even lower level students, is paintings by Caravaggio, the genre paintings that he did. This one is called the Cardsharps, and it was painted about 1594. There's a bunch of different versions of this, I think, as well. And the question that you ask the students is very simple. What's happening? And how is the painter telling this story? And Caravaggio's genre paintings are particularly good for this. So take a minute and just think, what do you see in this photo? What would your students be able to tell you about what's going on in this painting? Take a moment and just look at that, and look at the detail. and you can focus on the different people in this painting in turn. So we might start with this person on the left, and you can ask your students, what do you think about this person? Do you think they're rich, or are they poor? And why? Why do you think that? And your students will say, well, this person, they're pretty clean. They're neat. Look at their skin. Their skin is very pale. And you can contrast that to the person to the right here, who is darker. You can talk about the person's clothes. They're very pretty, are they? What is that? Is it a dress? Is it a shirt? And you move from person to person. What's this guy doing in the middle? What's he doing? What's he looking at? Aha, he's looking at this player's cards, and he's signaling over here to the person that's on the right. Now, is this person in the middle, is this person also rich? Or are they maybe not rich? And you point out and you get your students to look, aha, he has darker skin. Here, what this probably means is that he spends time outside. This person has very light skin. They probably don't have to work outside. You can see as well that his gloves are not very pretty. They have holes in them, so you can see his fingers. These things are the painter telling you the story. And your students, once they get used to this, they start to see things that they didn't see before. What about this person who's on the right? What are they doing? What do you see? Aha, this person has lighter skin. But are they really rich? Are they as high class as the person on the left? Probably not. And what's this going on down here behind that person's back? That's right. You've got cards. So what's happening? These two people are cheating this person out of their money. Students will get that story and they will be able to tell you that. But what you spend your time doing as a teacher in these situations when you use visual art like this is exactly what we want to be doing. You're helping the students express themselves and express their ideas. You're not spending hours and hours giving them complicated instructions. You're helping get the words out of their brains and into their mouths, and then out of their mouths and into the air. Caravaggio is really, really quite good for that particular thing. Now, if you have a higher level class, you could do something with Jacques-Louis David's painting. If you use this, I would suggest not telling your students the title of the painting, because they will panic and they might flee, they might run away. But what you can do is you again start off with, what do you see here? And you say, tell me the story. What's going on? Who are these people? And you can let them give their own names to the people in the painting. Now, there's a very long, complicated story about this painting, and you can tell the students that if you want to. You can just go to Wikipedia and you can look it up and you can share that with them later. But the point here is that you get them to describe what they're seeing, and they create a story. Now, why is neoclassical art so great for this? Because neoclassical art they're very fond of telling stories. The question here is, what's the story, and how close can students get to the real story? The gist of this particular story, if you don't know, is that this guy who's lying in bed is very, very sick. And this person is trying to figure out why he's sick. He doesn't look particularly, he examines him and he says, oh, hey, yeah, you're sick, but I can't figure out what's wrong with you. Physically, there's nothing really wrong with you. So what's going on? And eventually, the person on the left in red discovers that he's sick because he is in love. And who is he in love with? He's in love with that woman over on the right. And you can see the tendency of neoclassical artists to have their figures posed. He's very clearly pointing. And who is he pointing at? He's pointing at this woman. And you can ask your students, well, who is this woman? And you'll be surprised how often they'll say, oh, well, that's his mom. Not quite. It's his mother-in-law, actually, but he's in love with her. And he can't be, because that's his mom. And that's weird. So you can see that the painter here is telling this story. And the students, they won't know the story, probably, but they'll be able to see and understand what that story is once you explain it to them. And you can also have them do comparisons. For instance, here on the right, you have this woman who's obviously very, very rich. Well, why? What do you see that tells you that she's rich? Well, her clothes are much prettier than this lady's clothes. And look at her hair. It's very elaborately done up. And look at the detail on her robe and the fabric here. What is this fabric? Silk, maybe? We don't know. But the students are so interested in trying to tell you why this lady is rich that they forget that they're actually using English, which is great. And it's exactly what you want. You can also talk about this woman. This woman, I just love her. She is so excited. She's so intrigued by this, by what's going on. Why? Why is she so happy? And what's she doing? Why is she on her knees like that? And your students will probably be able to tell you, well, it looks like she's a maid or a servant of some kind. And she's probably interested in what's going on, because this is not something that happens every day, is it? Absolutely not. How many times in your life will you ever see a doctor say, this royal son is sick because he's in love with his mother-in-law? It's amazing. It's just an amazing story. And the students, they get there. You help them, you talk to them, you elicit their ideas and their answers, and you help them fix their English. And you end up at the end of the lesson with a story. Another type of image that I use is definitely not art in the sense of great masterworks of art like neoclassical painters or impressionist painters. They're good old-fashioned posters, film posters. And even with a movie that is as bad as Titanic, I hate that movie. because she kills him. It's a murder story, I'm telling you. But the poster is absolutely great. You have the tagline here, and you can teach your students how to dissect and how to analyze posters. What kind of movie is this? Well, it's a disaster movie. We know that because we know the story of the Titanic, but it's also a love story. Well, how do we know it's a love story? Because we've got Leonardo DiCaprio and that other actress. My students, my Korean students, they know Leonardo DiCaprio and they all love him. And poor Kate Winslet, they can never remember who she is. Poor Kate. And you can tell that it's a love story because they're so close together. And you can talk about how this tagline, nothing on earth could come between them. You can see where the ship is pointed and it's going kind of up, and it's actually going to be this thing that comes between them. And you can talk about how the title has to be bigger than everything else because they want you to remember the title. And you can talk about how the font size is the same for both the actors because they're both equally famous. And if you have a really famous actor, they might get a bigger font size. And if we didn't actually know who Kate Winslet was at all, we wouldn't see her name at all on that poster. You can use posters for movies that they know, and this is really good if you've got that 5 or 6 minutes at the end of class. And I know this has happened to probably all of you, where you don't have enough time to do something new because you'd have to explain it, and you've got these 5 minutes and you're thinking, oh, I can do something. What can I do? Well, you get a bunch of film posters and then you just pop one up on the screen and you have them analyze it. And again, you can get the students to send you a poster of whatever the hit film is. Here, for the movie Jaws, you can ask them the question, how are they selling this movie? The purpose of movie posters is pretty clear. They want you to buy a ticket to see the movie, or they want you to stream it, or, of course, you would never suggest to your students that they download these movies, but some of them you can see for free on YouTube. How are they selling this movie? You can really take this apart. What type of movie is it? It's a monster movie. How do we know? Well, because there's a giant shark, and look at all those teeth. Holy cow. Now, obviously, you're not going to use this with elementary school students because they might panic. And you can talk about the use of colors and the use of and the selection of fonts. So you have red here, and red, of course, has that obvious connotation to it. You can talk about how they use the word terrifying twice. The terrifying motion picture from the terrifying #1 bestseller. And why are they telling us that it's a #1 bestseller? What are they trying to convince us of? They're trying to convince us that this is a movie that's worth seeing. And then you can also talk here about why these different actors all have the same size font if you want to. And you can talk about how, at least when Jaws was released in the 1970s and 80s, this was a pretty typical layout where you'd have all of this information that you can't read that's on the bottom. And nowadays we don't tend to have that. And you can do this, and it's so easy, and it's so powerful, and it's so engaging. And the students, they dig this. Even if they don't like horror movies, they'll be able to engage with this content. You can also give them posters for movies that they won't have seen, just to see what they do with them. Now, this movie is extremely interesting. Rosemary's Baby. It's very, very old. None of my students have ever seen it. It's one of the classic horror movies, probably of all time. But my students, when I show this to them, they very rarely come up with the idea that this is a horror film. They think that Mia Farrow here is just happy and she's just dreaming about her baby, and it's great, and it's going to be like a drama, and they have no idea. And you can talk about the color here, and the color green is really, really interesting, because typically if you ask students what they think of when they think of the color green, they say things like nature and trees and grass and life. They don't think of it in terms of it being of it having negative associations, which is really, really interesting. And then you elicit this information from them, and then you tell them, hey, guess what? It's a horror movie. It's a really, really good horror movie. And they are surprised, and then they're interested, and maybe they go and watch it, and maybe they don't. So I'm going to show you one more poster, and I just want to, not to be overly dramatic, but I do want to tell you that there's going to be there's some blood in this next picture. And this is a poster that I just used recently in a class a couple of weeks ago. Yes, Fernando has just sent me a message that says you can choose a theme and get several film posters of different films that deal with that same theme. Absolutely right. You can organize these in many, many, many different ways. And movie posters are awesome. In this particular instance, I was talking to my class about the Korean horror film A Tale of Two Sisters, which is, if you've not seen it and you're a fan of horror movies, you should definitely see this. It is an all-time favorite of mine. It's one of the most famous Korean horror films in the world. Now, here in this instance, I was telling my students what was important about this. So you have the tagline here, which you can't really read, which says every family has its dark secrets. You can see that over here on the bottom, well, actually, you all probably can't see it, but on the bottom in red between the young lady's feet is the Korean title in red. And you can talk about things like the position of the father's hand, which is unusual. This is a play on a very typical type of family portrait that you see in Korea everywhere. Parents standing behind the kids, and they have this up in their house. But here you see that the father's hand is placed away, and it's not touching anybody, which is important. Is that important? I don't know. You can compare the body positions of the two sisters here. On the left, is she sleeping? Is she dead? We're not really sure. And on the right, you can tell that she's extremely rigid. She's extremely stiff. Does this have to do with the way her mother is touching her shoulders? Is she grabbing her shoulders? It's very, very interesting. And in professionally done movie posters, they do this stuff on purpose. They definitely do it on purpose. And the last thing that you notice is that the three women, the two sisters and the mother, are all connected. They're all physically connected to each other. Well, they're actually connected to the girl who's on the right. So this is a really neat poster. It's very, very effective at selling the movie. Now, in this particular class, what I'm interested in doing is comparing Korean culture to other cultures. And if we look at the Korean poster, we find that it is different in a couple of very important ways. So they use the same image, and here we have the title that's in Korean, Janghwa Hongryeon, in case you can't read Korean, which you probably can't. So you have a different tagline. Over here it says "Uri chibe noro oseo," which means come over to my house or come over to our house. So it's a different tagline. And very importantly, between the lower legs of the two girls in a slightly different position, but also in red, you have something that says "Gajok Gwedam," which translates into English as a family ghost story. Now, this is absolutely fascinating, and it's really, really important. In the English poster, what they put was just the Korean title. And it's really small, and it's kind of a detail because it's not a literal translation of the title. Probably very, very few of the international people, the English viewing audience, are going to understand what that means. But here they tell us it's a ghost story. Now, why is this important? Why didn't they tell us this on the English poster? Because the first time you view this film, if you don't know the story, which a non-Korean, there's no reason to think that a non-Korean would know this story. And there's every reason to know that Koreans, they all know the story of Janghwa Hongryeon. They all know it. It's a very old Korean folktale. So here they're putting in this little detail, but they're omitting it from the English poster because it would be a major spoiler. It would give it away. Now, so I've kind of spoiled the movie for you there a little bit, but believe me, it's still worth watching if you're a horror fan. So let me give you a few tips and a couple of good resources, and then I would be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Some tips for selecting and using images. I think a couple of you have asked in the chat if I can share links to these. I can do that. You can search by keyword. So if you want to have, nature paintings, you can go by seasons. You can just do fall painting. You can go by artist name, or you can go by genre, and you can just go out there and Google stuff. Yep, someone's just put a link in the chat that you can click on. A lot of museums these days are opening up their catalogs and they're making them virtual, so you can also do that. Use safe search and search before class. I put this in here because sometimes you're thinking about getting a nice picture and you type something in to search for it and you end up with images that are probably or definitely not appropriate. Search before class, don't do it live. I made that mistake once and no one was injured, but I won't do that again. Be careful. You can let students submit images. You can use student art if you want. And you give them that agency and you give them control of that, and they'll send you stuff. They actually will. Use Wikipedia. Wikipedia is your friend. If you want to get any of the images that I've used today, like Monet's Sunrise or the Jacques-Louis David painting, go to Wikipedia, because the images that are on there, you're not going to be infringing on any copyright, and you want to be careful. Use Pixabay or Pexels. You can go to either one of those sites and you can get free, copyright-free images and Creative Commons licensed images off of there. There's so many places that you can go to get images. So if you're interested and you're really excited, which I hope you are, about using art, and you want to spend a little bit of money, not very much, and get some resources that you can keep, two great resources are by Jorge Set, I think that's his name. I apologize if I've mispronounced it. And Kieran Donaghy. On the left, you can see Teaching English with Art. This author has several different books about teaching English with art. He has leveled speaking and writing activities in all of them. This particular book is all Vincent van Gogh. He has another book that has 90 speaking and writing activities from a variety of artists. You can buy these for your Kindle. I think they're about $7. And you've got ready-made activities. They're correlated to the CEFR levels, so you know exactly what you're getting into and exactly what you're doing, and you can use them and have them. It's a fantastic series. So if you've got a little bit of money and you want to use art, the great masterworks, this is a place that you can go and it's all done for you, and it will pay for itself in a matter of a couple of lessons. Now, it's probably occurred to you that you can also use moving images. I don't have time to talk about those today, but if you want to use video and film and teach language using moving images, Kieran Donaghy, a very lovely Irish gentleman who lives and works in Spain, has this book, Film in Action. I have a copy of this. I've used it a lot. It's absolutely great. Students love films even more than they love images, and they understand film in a certain way. But when you take this book and you look at the activities that are in it, and you bring that into the classroom, it's exactly the same. The students forget that they're learning a language and they start talking about film. If you're really super excited about film and want to really learn how to take full length feature films or shorter films and use them in your language teaching, Kieran also offers a course on his website, the School for Training, which I took this last summer. That's an investment of time and money there for you. But if you really want to know your stuff, Kieran is the person to talk to there. So those are two really great resources if you want to use art in your classes or if you want to use film. Now, another type of image that I didn't have time to get into today, and you should really have maybe another webinar on this particular topic, is infographics. I've used infographics and lessons based on infographics in my classes, and the students, the higher level students, they really get engaged with this in a very, very deep way. And you can also get your students to make infographics. It's very, very easy to do, but that's a little bit off topic. Again, if this interests you, Nick Peachy has some absolutely fantastic resources for exploiting infographics and also for digital literacy. You can just Google him and you can go to his website and you can purchase either one of these or both of these, or purchase a subscription. I'm not affiliated with any of these people in any way. I don't get a percentage. I'm not telling you this in order to make myself money. I'm just telling you because I've used these resources and found them to be extraordinarily effective. So if you want to read more about the image and English language teaching, I attached this file in the chat, and I think what I'll do is I'll attach it one more time here and share it with you. It's a free book, so we're not doing anything untoward by sharing it with you. Just 1 second, and I will attach it. There we go. And this is a collection of articles that if you're really interested, you can go and read on about the image in English language teaching a little bit more. That is it for me. I see I'm 1 minute over time, but that is okay, I think. Thank you all very much. If you have questions, you can type them into the chat right now, and I will do my best to answer them. Or if you want to email me and ask me that way, that's fine. My email is m.free. Yes, that's really my last name, at kangwon.ac.kr.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Michael. Really appreciate your help. It was an engaging session and so many positive feedback in the chat you can see. And now the floor is open for questions. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the YouTube chat as well. So for our YouTube viewers, if you have any questions, you can also use chat to put your questions in. So I see this question from Sadia Rana. She asked that, are images relevant to literature students only, or they can be used with any classroom?
Yeah. Sorry, I see there's a question from Luciana. As we move to approaches that use English as a means of instruction to other subjects, have you expanded these ideas to teach, talk about art or history? Yes, I have. I did a short, intensive summer course on visual art history, and trying to more systematically go through different periods of art and expose the students to a simplified version of classical art history. I haven't done it with history itself, but I have done it with art, and it worked very, very well. The students were very interested, and it was, what's very interesting is that my students really didn't know a lot of the famous works of art that I thought they would have known. So it really opened my eyes to the value of getting that out there. Yeah, so I've used it to teach about art. I haven't done it for history, not yet. I was planning to. I was going to teach a course in the history of Western civilization, but they canceled the course, so I didn't get a chance to do that. Can images be used with all classes or literature students only? You can use these in any classes that you want. Absolutely any classes. And you can use them, and they can be whole lessons, or they can just be 5-minute fillers, or they can be used for independent work or homework. Lots of different ways to use them.
Great. Another question from Amra. She asked that, do you think that images can be, useful or relevant with certain skills, more than, other skills? Are you think, yeah, they are relevant and can be used for all the skills?
Mostly I use them for speaking and writing, but you can use them for reading. You can have them go to Wikipedia and read Wikipedia articles. And also there is Simple Wiki, which is a simplified version of Wikipedia. So the language is at a lower level, so that students can they have a better chance of understanding what they're seeing. Another interesting thing about Wikipedia is that you can use the translation function, which is on the left side of the screen. If you scroll downwards, you can see that some articles are available in languages other than English, and you can let the students use their own L1 to compare and help them understand what they're reading in English.
Wonderful. So another question from Vimi Suresh from India, and she asked that how can the beauty of images be effectively used to enrich the learning process of students with learning disabilities?
Oh, that's interesting. Hmm. I would have to give that some thought. I think it would depend on what the student's particular disability is. Um, hmm. I'm not sure I have a very good answer for that particular question.
Yeah. So other question from Kamal: how images help in child learning process?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that,
She
Amanullah?
says yes. Kamal says that how images can help in child learning process.
How they can help.
Mhm.
Hmm. I think that really depends on the particular student or group of students, how they can help. I'd need more specific information. I mean, for my students, the way it helps them is that it makes them more comfortable once they know what to do, once they know what I expect, and they know that there's no wrong answers for using this, they relax and they engage a little bit more.
So I don't see another questions. Yes, one from Shahnaz. What about geography subject? So I think geography is a great subject to use images. What do you think, Michael?
Sure. I mean, here what you can do for the images that I've used that are at least related to geography is Google Maps. And we have I'm sure if you're language teachers, you have these horribly boring directions lessons that have go straight and turn left at the corner. And what I did was, with some of my classes, and this is even just elementary school students, you take Google Maps and you tell them, you get them to tell the other students how to get home, how to get to their house, and they actually use Google Maps in order to do that. I'm not sure how much that relates to geography, but Google Maps would be absolutely awesome for that. You can use historical maps as well. One of the things that I did recently, we were talking in one of my classes about the Korean War, and we had there's an interactive map of the Korean Peninsula that shows troop movements, and it shows how little space at one point what is now South Korea actually occupied. It was very, very small. And you can see, using these different maps from different periods of time, how the borders of the country changed.
That sounds wonderful. So I don't see any other questions. Any last words or message for our audience, Michael?
Thank you all so much for coming. I wish you a good evening and a happy afternoon. And if you do have any other questions that come to mind, feel free to get in touch with me.
Great. Thank you so very much, Michael, for this wonderful webinar. We really appreciate that. And for certificates, if you're interested, you can email on info.pdwebinars@gmail.com. All updates for new webinars are available at website www.pdwebinars.org. And don't forget to follow us on social media channels. We're available on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, this recording will also be available at Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel. So we have next webinar on Tuesday with Simon Bose. It's on teacher self-reflection, and Simon has much of his work in teacher education. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in that webinar. Till then, take